Moving on, let's talk about subject headings. So, what we've been talking about for the most part today so far has been bibliographic description. And that's a unique process that has overlaps with, but is not the same thing as subject analysis. So with bibliographic description, you're describing the resource, the physical resource, the carrier of the information. You're thinking mostly on what Ferber would call a manifestation level. So basically you're thinking on the level of, here's the book that I own at my library and that the library down the street could also own a copy of, and that I could buy another copy of off of Amazon. It's sort of this level where everybody could have a copy if they wanted to. They just need to purchase it. And it could be exactly like yours, except that the barcode would be different. In bibliographic description, you're creating a surrogate record. You're taking that snapshot of the resource you have to tell people what you've got, and you're following RDA rules. The thing is, most of our patrons don't look for resources using the physical description. They use that to narrow things down or to decide that you have what they want. But most of the time what they look for is, I want a book about such and such, or I want a romance novel or a Western. They're looking for what something is about or what something is. And that's where your subject analysis comes in, because now you're talking about the content of the resource. You're talking about that work level, and this means that you can tie together, if you've got the same book that's published by 3 different publishers, they can be tied together at a work level because it's the same book. It's just published by 3 different people. So work level is sort of where you're living when you're thinking, or maybe, you're thinking about work level when you're thinking, can I put this hardcover and this paperback on the same record? You're thinking, is it the same content? And that's sort of the same with subject headings. You're thinking, is this the same content? And this ties it together, even if it's not the same thing. We do our subject analysis by providing subject headings and also classification numbers. They're just different types of subject access. And we use standards like Library of Congress subject headings and Dewey Decimal Classification to create this kind of access. So this is pretty important stuff, and it's pretty complex. Fortunately, most of the time, most of you probably can just find those subject headings and classification and all of that on the record and go about your merry way, but sometimes it does come back and you have to do something. So we're going to talk a little bit about coming at it from both those directions. With subject headings, your subject headings all have subject authority records. So it works very much like with the name authority we talked about. So you can have a subject heading for unidentified flying objects, and it would have its own subject authority record, and it would tie together all these different books and DVDs and whatever that are all in the same subject. It also makes it possible for your patron who comes in and searches for UFOs to find everything with the subject heading unidentified flying objects, because UFOs is on the unidentified flying objects authority record as a synonym. So this makes it so you can find the nonfiction books, the fiction books, all the stuff that's about that subject, the DVDs about the subject, everything would be tied together. You have different types of these headings. So the most familiar probably is subject headings, and these are what the resource is about. In NC Cardinal, you as a consortium favor Library of Congress subject headings over other types. They are especially good for nonfiction materials because it's pretty easy to say what something that is nonfiction is about. It's less easy to say what a fiction book is about sometimes, or a fiction film or anything like that, because sometimes it just sort of is, you know? It's like Seinfeld. It's about nothing. It's what it is, it's not what it's about. So sometimes these work better than other times. And keep in mind that typically what we've said in the cataloging world is that when you have more than one subject heading, the first listed is the most important, and it's the one that you'll usually want to base your classification upon. That said, if you get someone else's record and you're using it in your library and you want to put it in a place that corresponds to the second or the third subject heading because that works best for your patrons, don't reorder the subject headings. Just put it where you want to put it. They're not going to know the difference. Do what you need to do as a best practice for your library. But if you need to assign one of these and you want to know where to start with that first heading. Because that's what somebody hopefully decided was the most important heading and put at the top of the list. It's just sort of a way to try to make our lives easier. In some cases, as I said, what something is about is not your main concern or the main way that people are going to look for or access that resource. Sometimes they want to look for a specific type of resource, what the resource is. And for that, you need genre form headings. So NC Cardinal prefers the Library of Congress genre form terms. However, you can potentially use the GSAFDs. So prefer Library of Congress, then look elsewhere if you don't find the term you need. And this is really good for video recordings, music recordings, and fiction. And they can be used at the same time. You'll see a lot of resources that have subject and genre headings present. Because think about your romance novels. You'll have like 5 different subject headings. Rich people, pregnancy, man-woman relationships, royalty. Never the actual subject that people are looking for in their romance novels, but you're sort of beating around the bush there. But you've got all these subject headings, but honestly what they're looking for is romance novels. So you have a genre heading for romance fiction. Now you've created a way to tie all of those together that people will look at, but the subject headings certainly don't hurt, because there may be somebody who's like, I want to be as escapist as possible, and I want to read all the romance novels about rich people. And all the young women, because it's always young women, who become a maid or a secretary and then fall in love with their boss, and now they're billionaires and they live happily ever after. Because, that's exactly how life works. You have these ways of steering people to what they want, but think about how they're going to initially search for this stuff. You want the genre form headings in there for your romance novels, but don't take out the subject headings. They're useful too. So with genre form and subject headings, there is a set of best practices from NC Cardinal. This outlines some good stuff for you about how to find certain types of headings. So for example, if you want to keep or put in Library of Congress subject headings, the second indicator should be 0. If you see something with a second indicator of 1, this means you're looking at Library of Congress subject headings for children's literature, which is not preferred in NC Cardinal. If it duplicates something that is Library of Congress, you get rid of it. We're going to look at that in a minute. Sears subject headings have a second indicator of 8. And then another source would have a second indicator of 7. So this would be like your Spanish subject headings. Some of you are using those. Definitely don't strip out the subject headings in Spanish, because somebody's going to need those at some point. And you'll see this also with the genre headings. You'll see that second indicator of 7. And you can actually see how that works down here. So for genre headings, they go in a 655 field, second indicator of 7, and then at the end of the heading, a delimiter 2 and LCGFT. So this gives you recommendations on how to use these. There will probably be more coming once authorities are discussed, just because it overlaps so much with authorities. And then there's some nice recommendations for archival materials. That should be fun. And talks about getting rid of extraneous subject headings. So the Bizarch, or whatever you want to call them. Fast headings. Oh God, get rid of the fast headings. Whoever thought that was a good idea. I just sort of want to shake somebody at OCLC every once in a while. Why? Why, guys? So that you end up with a nicer list like the one here. There's a recommendation for foreign language. So this is the recommendation for fast. It should just say on here, like in big letters, like kill fast headings or something. Seek and destroy, nuke the fast headings, whatever it takes. Take out your violent tendencies and get rid of all fast headings. But this gives you the, you can tell I don't like them. This gives you all of the recommendations for how to deal with these. And we may come back to this. This last part with graphic novels. This is really handy. Because, I mean, honestly, dealing with graphic novels is hard enough as it is. At least here you've got some genre headings that can be used that they've sort of outlined for you so that you have some sort of idea of where to start with these terminologies. And we'll talk about where you can go to find more. Does that all sort of make sense? Okay. Yeah. So more is coming. Yeah, because, I mean, subject, genre, this is all part of authorities. So, yeah. I don't envy you guys having to work through all that fun stuff. Enjoy. So there are different types of subject headings. I sort of mentioned this before. So you've got Library of Congress subject headings. You should favor these in the catalog. They have that second indicator of 0 after a 6 something field. So maybe 600 or 650, 651. Those are probably the ones you'll see most often. Genre form terms, you should favor these over other types of genre form terms, the Library of Congress ones. They should go in a 655 field. I meant to change that before today and I forgot. But instead of a 6XX, that should be like 655. That will really, that's where genre form goes now. So it'd be a 655 with a second indicator of 7, and then it really does have to have after that heading the delimiter to LCGFT. Because 7 is a way of telling the computer generally, this is some vocabulary that we don't have a specific code for. The 2 subfield is used to tell it what vocabulary that is. So if you don't tell it that, it can't index these terms right and create the right linking through the authority records and make them as functional as possible. So if you see something with the second indicator 7 and not that delimiter to LCGFT, it's something you should check or look at and then probably delete, because quite often it's something like, here's a subject heading in French. And you're like, that's great, delete. My patrons don't care. And just get rid of it. There are a lot of other kinds. So Library of Congress subject headings for children's, delete these if they're repeating anything in Library of Congress subject headings. Obviously, if it's something that's totally different from what you've already got and you think it'll benefit patrons, I mean, don't get rid of something that's going to be beneficial. But if it's repetitive, delete these and keep the Library of Congress. With Sears, go ahead and delete these. And if you have GSAFD, I did say it right, headings, evaluate these. Make sure there's not a Library of Congress genre form term that could be used to replace that. Let me see. Let me show you where you can get Library of Congress genre form terms. So it's on this website called id.loc.gov/authorities. So that was id.loc.gov/authorities. And in here you can go ahead and find name authority files, subject headings, and you might find this easier to read than the other one. I actually find the other one a little easier to search and navigate, but that's just me. So you may actually really like this one, but you can choose from a long list of vocabularies. I mean, if you're stuck in a music library, medium of performance, thesaurus for music, have fun with that. So you can decide if it's 2 pianos or rather pianos 2 or piano 4 hands or piano 2 8 hands. I swear there are people who think about this all the time and come up with the vocabularies. They're crazy. I sort of tried to help with that at one point, and I ran screaming the other way. But there is some interesting stuff here. You can find the mark languages here. So there's a lot of interesting, useful stuff in here. But we're going to look at the genre form terms. So let's say you had a romance novel. So you could put in romance, search, and now you get a list. So you can see you've got romance films used for chick flicks. Oh my gosh, that's the best thing ever. Romance television, romance comics, love poetry, romance fiction. This is really going to be what you're looking for. So you can click on it and you can actually see some stuff about, so you're using this for love stories, romances, romantic fiction. It's a subdivision of fiction. It talks about where this term shows up. So it's actually something that's used by GSAFT and Library of Congress genre form. So this you could put into your record. You just put a 655, second indicator 7, romance fiction, period, delimiter 2, LCGFT, done. And you can find those sorts of terms in this vocabulary, and this is also free. Does that sort of make sense? Any questions? It's like the whirlwind tour of genre form terms. So you have places where you can look for these. For a lot of the stuff that you're going to be cataloging, what you're going to do is you're going to find the specific terms that always apply to that, and then you can keep a cheat sheet. And one of the things I'll be advocating probably for the rest of today is having lots of cheat sheets. I think it's incredibly valuable. The 3x fields, if you do a lot of AV recording, 4x fields, your 007s, all that sort of stuff, you can have cheat sheets lined up so you can just copy and paste information into your records for different types of resources. And I have stuff like this. I mean, I have files on the computer, but one of the things I do is I also have print files, and I have like a notebook that's my cataloging cheat sheets. And that notebook's about to get really big this summer because I'm working on some weird stuff this summer. But it's basically like, DVDs, things you need to know. And I record like the genre form terms that are typically used, or the ones that I use a lot, just so I have a place where I can go and find that stuff without having to do an exhaustive search of the vocabularies again, because I know there are certain things I'm always going to use. I also keep example records. So when I find a really good record, or I create a really good record, I print that thing out and I keep it. And I save it on my computer. I mean, I use them a lot. My students have seen dozens of these by this time. I just keep reusing them for everybody. But you guys can reuse them as templates for stuff you want to do. So you create a record for a doll when you have to catalog one in your library. I've had to do it twice. Once you've created one of those and it looks good, keep the record. The first time you have to catalog a GoPro camera, keep that record. Even if it's a different GoPro that comes in the next time, you can alter things. You at least have that example. So that's going to be really helpful, and especially with things like genre form headings and subject headings. There's stuff you're going to work with that's always going to have the same or similar headings. So keep a list of those. And you can keep it online, you can keep it in print, you can do what I do and keep both so that it's easier to search one way or the other depending on what my brain's doing that day. You know, weird things with the brains. So just customize to what you need. So ways in which these can work. So here we are back at our Star Wars movie. And what you can see here is I do have some subject headings. So it's about Skywalker, Luke, fictitious character. That delimiter V drama, you'll see that a lot with movies and TV shows too. It's a way of saying that this is a dramatization of something, basically. So that's another one that can go in your notebook of things to remember. There were a lot of subject headings for this one, actually. When I pulled this record up, I was like, really? I mean, honestly, it's just a spaghetti western with spaceships. But, I mean, there were tons of these. I picked out just a few. Life on Other Planets, drama. There were a bunch of them. And then you had a bunch of genre headings, too. So, science fiction films. That's an important one. Your patrons, you'll have patrons who want to come in and just look for science fiction films or science fiction movies or whatever, and this would come up. And another one that's really handy, this is one of the ones that I keep in a notebook because I can never remember the exact wording, but video recordings for the hearing impaired. Because this is really handy to make sure your patrons know that you have access for those who have hearing difficulties. And so you're meeting some of those ADA requirements for your library simply by letting people know that you have something that they can watch and enjoy even if they can't hear it, because there are ways to get around that. So that's one to keep in mind. So the repetitive subject headings. You don't need to know that the book is about frogs 3 times. Once is sufficient. People are smart enough to figure that out, I swear. And if they're not, we're going to teach them to be by telling them once. In this case, we have the Face to Face with Frogs book, and we have 2 repetitive subject headings. We've got the Library of Congress subject heading first, Frogs, Juvenile Fiction, and we've got the children's subject heading, Frogs. I mean, honestly, why do you need 2 of them? It doesn't create access. It actually may take away access because people may just be confused or irritated. It takes up space and it just looks weird. So what you are going to do is go in there and get rid of anything that's not Library of Congress that is repetitive of other things. So you get rid of the children's subject heading. The Library of Congress one is perfectly fine. It gets to the heart of the matter. 1 subject heading, done. I mean, the book is about frogs. There you go. Pretty straightforward. So get rid of the duplicate subject headings. Your item catalogers, anyone who's been to the workshops so far and the people who will be coming in the future will hear repeatedly, if you see the repeating subject headings, send these to a bibliographic cataloger. So you will be getting these for things that you're not necessarily cataloging, just so you can get rid of the repetitive subject headings. Definitely do that. And if it's something you don't necessarily have time for, as I mentioned earlier, I am the person who is in charge of setting students up with practicum locations. And as evidenced by my, I think, 6 or 5 former students and 1 future student in this room from UNCG today, I'm turning out people who like cataloging. Or who at least get stuck cataloging. I have people who want to go out and try this stuff out, and this is the kind of thing where this could be part of a project that you could have a student doing. And I'm talking with the state library folks about setting up stuff where they're working partly with the state library and partly with you guys. So think about this, and if there are projects like that that you really want to get done, definitely let me know or let April or Benjamin know, and we will get this figured out, because I have students who are everywhere in this state. So they can come to you, a lot of them. And so we'll see what we can do. But stuff like that, if you have time for it, go ahead and do it. If you don't, start storing it up and start talking to people about getting in somebody to help out with some of these cleanup projects, because it's good experience working in a catalog for somebody who hasn't before. You will have to supervise them though. So, yes.
On some of the subject headings, after all the numbers and everything, it'll have a cardinal.
Yep.
Okay, I have seen actually ones that repeat themselves with different cardinal numbers.
Mm-hmm.
So what do we do with that?
Go ahead and delete the repeating ones. Don't worry about the cardinal numbers. That just means that it is now linked up to an authority record, but just because it's linked up to an authority record doesn't necessarily mean you want it. So the frogs from children's literature could be something that's linked up to an authority record. It's still repetitive. And if you have to choose, if like the frogs juvenile literature does not have that delimiter 0 cardinal thing after it, and the frogs in the children's literature does, still choose the Library of Congress one, because that link is coming. So don't let the fact that it's linking tell you not to do anything with it. Just go ahead and follow the same rules. We want those capabilities in the catalog, but it doesn't necessarily mean we have to keep them all the time. So if you need to create subject or genre headings, there are some ways to do this, and it doesn't have to be terrifying. It might still be a little scary, and a little fear keeps you on your toes, but it doesn't have to be terrifying. So the first thing I do when I need to assign subject or genre form headings is I go look at what other libraries have done. I see if they have the same resource. If they do, I steal their headings. Why should I have to come up with something new if somebody else has already done it? That's the beauty of cooperative cataloging. If they don't have the same thing I have, I look for similar things. So maybe I do a keyword search and find stuff that seems to be about the same subject as mine, and find some subject headings that I can go double check. Or maybe I find that somebody has a different edition of the same book I have. Well, now I can take their subject headings. So I really like starting by looking at what other people have done. At the very least, it gives you some ideas of where to start if you still need to create your own subject headings. I really like the Library of Congress catalog and the UNC Chapel Hill catalogs, because you can pull up the MARC records very easily. And that way, if you find subject headings you like, you can also copy the encoding, and you don't have to go into bib formats and decide, is this thing going to be in an X subfield or a V subfield? Choosing between the X and the V is sometimes just like, why? Is this what it's about, or is it what it is? Just go look and see what UNC or Library of Congress did. WorldCat local is a good place to look for subject headings, but it's not a good place to find those MARC records. You'll find a lot of stuff there, but you can't see the MARC record from WorldCat local. Now you can see who has it and link out to their catalogs and look to see if they have MARC records. But if they don't, and you go back to the WorldCat Locals catalog, you will go back to where you began, not to where you were. So just keep that in mind. The number of times that I've had to do this, I'm on the second page of libraries that have this resource, and I click on one of them, and I go out, and there's not a MARC record. I think, okay, I'll just go back, and I go back to the first page of the library. It's so frustrating. WorldCat local. So look at what others have, see what they've got, and go from there. If you have access to it, Classification Web is a really nice website. It is available for a fee. However, if you're a former student of mine, you know how to get into this for free, and you can bring your friends along. It is up to date, it's fairly easy to navigate, and it gives you a way to look for subject headings, names, geographic locations, genre form terms, and a bunch of other vocabularies. That said, you can get the same information going to authorities.loc.gov or that id.loc.gov/authorities, which are the same information just presented in different ways. Both of those are free. Both of them are kept up to date. Both of them are fairly easy to navigate. And you can access a whole lot of different vocabularies from those platforms. I'd mentioned that classification is another type of subject access. We're going to talk about Dewey classification. Obviously, you guys have various local systems for classification also, whether it's that we put all the romance fiction here under R and the westerns here under W, or we have our genealogy stuff cataloged with this special local classification system because Dewey doesn't really work all that well for genealogy collections. Whatever it is, those are there, but obviously we're not going to go into those because those are customized to you. So if that's something you're unclear about, that's something you really want to talk with your coworkers and figure out what's going on and how it can work best for your patrons. With Dewey, this is often linked to that first subject heading, but not always. The number, you can find